Hello, everyone. Today, I'm here to talk about how you can power your CI using Kotlin as a language. So far, what we have been doing is at Bitrise, we'll go over everything in more detail in upcoming slides. But you could write your own custom tools and custom pipelines and stuff like that at Bitrise. But I'll also focus on how you can do as an Android person, write it on Kotlin or Java, whatever works for you. So just to briefly tell you who I am, my name is Sujit, and I'm a senior mobile engineer at Bitrise. I haven't really been here long, about 4 months or so, but one of the reasons why I came here is because we have been using Bitrise for quite a while at my previous place to pretty much build the app, release the app, and do everything related to development, anywhere from just on your personal machine to CICD and create all the release processes and so on as an infra person. I started Android since Gingerbread, so think 2.x back in 2010, 11, mostly on machine learning domain for the most part, about 7 years or so. But then Compass is the previous company that I used to work with. It was more real estate, but we were technology focused. And we had Android team and iOS team. I used to work on the infra side on Android, and then I switched on to iOS, but I still love Android. It's probably my preferred choice. And here to talk about the DevOps side of the development. For mobile app and the releases, we have a bunch of different steps that we have to go through to create it first and then put it out to the customer. We have the processes of building your apps, testing it out, and then we have the processes to release your app. And then after you release it, you try to monitor it in certain ways so that you can make your app better. You try to do different kind of measurements within the app itself, and then there's a CI/CD strategy that you deploy to do whatever you want to do to get it out there. The Bitrise specifically, we focus on the CI/CD part of it, and the idea is to help you build the mobile releases in the fastest way possible and the quickest release possible, because one of the issues that a lot of my previous company had was if there is an issue, incident, how do you get the app after you hotfix it fastest way to the app store without relying on somebody who might be on a vacation. Basically, continuous communication, planning, integration, delivery, deployment, and testing and monitoring of your app is the part of the package. And to get to the mobile DevOps ideal place, we have been looking through like how we can get there. And it's a combination of a bunch of different things. Basically, people, the company itself, need to have a certain kind of culture to be able to develop that smoothness and that proper workflow to get to a certain place during your development lifecycle. You create a processes around it. You have RFCs, code reviews, all kinds of incident management, managing feature flags based on your new releases and stuff like that. And then on top of that, you have the tools surrounding your mobile apps, test automation, reporting like TestRail or something, and then you have process to release it and to monitor it. When you put all of this together, we have basically continuous integration, delivery, and deployment, what we consider mobile DevOps. These are the kind of things that we try to give certain flavor for and processes at Bitrise. And so we'll go a bit more around what we do at Bitrise and why it is probably one of the better tools that exist for mobile engineers. It's mostly because Bitrise is developed by developers, for people like us. And when I was at my previous company, we used to develop so many different CLI tools to automate a lot of different tasks. You have a bunch of different commands you need to run, a bunch of different things you need to do. You need to keep on doing it all the time. And so at Bitrise, the developers are like, okay, we'll just take all of these bullet points from all of these people, we'll put that into a package and create something that you can use and reuse across multiple different apps on both Android and iOS. And so that means you spend less time on things that are redundant and that are not as productive if you have to keep on doing them all the time. And you start writing code that actually matters. You could have 50 different infra engineers working on multiple different things to make sure app goes out of the door. But if you already have all these tools maintained and developed by somebody for you, you could have those engineers work on something more productive than working on repetitive tasks. And like I said, we just make sure that your apps get to a place where you'd consider you'd be satisfied with the release process that sits there, and you can answer questions about where the process is at. Like once you kick off a release, you have a bunch of different stakeholders to find out exactly what's going on with your releases. If something goes wrong with the release, how you're going to roll back, or how you're going to create a hotfix and take it out there. And we just make that processes much more faster. And how it works. We have a bunch of different tools, what we call steps, that we have already built. And these tools automate a lot of these things in clickable buttons. You just drag it in, create a workflow, and this creates the entire automation suite for you to do anywhere from cloning your repo to deploying it into the App Store. And also, of course, since we are cloud-based CICD, don't really have to maintain any kind of hardware. Like you'd probably do it with something like Jenkins and try to find out exactly, I have this EM1 sitting over there. How am I going to test it for M2 without actually getting M2 to be able to test it out? So we make our hardware ready before a lot of companies are ready themselves in their code base to support new kinds of hardware and new kinds of development environments. So all of these things are completely built in. You can use the kind of machines that is more preferable for you. If you want to use slower machines and you don't really care about how fast things are deployed, you can still use slower machines, or we have the fastest machine available for you to do things in the fastest way possible as well. And also, since those are all virtual machines, everything is sandboxed, and environment is something that you can predict what's going to happen because it is a completely brand new sandbox environment. And like I mentioned earlier, it is all click to configure. If you are a kind of person who do not deal that much with the UI, you can still write things manually using a YML manifest. That also works, but you could just click, drag, and then create your workflow entirely based on the UIs that we have. So when talking about the entire development process that we have, you have Firebase and app delivery for releasing the Google Play App Center and things like that. For testing, you might have Sauce Labs and again Genymotion, a lot of different tools around it. For building, again, Firebase comes into play in a lot of different places. Of course, you have Gradle and tools like that. Monitoring, we have Datadog, Slack, and things like that that you send messages to. And then for measurement, we have different tools around it, but Bitrise focuses specifically on the CI/CD part of everything. I talked about this earlier as well. So looking at a typical release process in most of the different places that I've been at, you kick off a release. There might be a bunch of different stakeholders at the release process when it kicks off. And all the steps that it is going through, you will have different people that you need to report to where the stage is at any given time. Basically, build your app, you test it out. You could have a bunch of different processes surrounding that, a bunch of different scripts that you might run to able to get to a place where you have a RC available for QA to be able to test it. Once it is there, you need to find a place to deploy that RC so that people can download it and be able to get it in such a way that if you update your RC, they need to be notified that there is a new version of RC. The one that you're testing right now is already outdated. Test a new one. And so these, you could utilize something like App Center or stuff like that we use at Compass, which is my previous company. But Bitrise also provides a place for you to host your own artifacts, like the RCs and the beta versions of your app. And then from there, you submit it to App Store. If it fails, you go through the process again, do the regression testing, build it out, actually, and stuff like that. And then finally, you release it out. And in the meantime, you might have other things that not entirely the development team would work on, things like release notes, metadata, screenshots, and stuff like that, that also comes in together. And now to implement all of that in the CI/CD, for the cloud-based system that we have at Bitrise, it basically costs a lot less money for you to set up, because you don't really have to maintain your own hardware. You don't have to maintain your own set of engineers to maintain your pipelines. And you don't have to really bang your head around the processes that you need to keep on updating. Every time there's a new stack, every time there's a new conference you go to, you identify, oh, there's a new set of tools that I need to support. You need to just be able to do all of that. Means it also becomes more reliable for you to be able to be like, okay, here's a new hardware that I can test, and then I can replicate what results I get and distribute my idea among every people that are working on. And also, another thing that Bitrise also focuses on is the security aspect of it. You might have a lot of keys and certificates that you don't want exposed outside. We have a secure way for you to put it in one single place. Means in most of the scenarios, especially we're talking about iOS development in general, you have a bunch of different certificates to be able to build different varieties of the app. And to be able to produce RCs, you need to keep on distributing that to a bunch of different people. Same thing with Android Key Store and all of that stuff as well. You can just put it on CI in the cloud and distribute this among all the developers. And you just tell them, oh, build it here, you get the app. Don't worry about the key store. So you don't really need to do things that are security risk to be able to do this. And like I said, minimal configuration, drag and drop, configure only the parameters that matter. Yeah, and time saving and all of that, we went over those bullet points as well. So looking at what we have at Bitrise, what we provide, once you have your source code in GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, wherever you have, the workflow provides support for so many different things to do on Android. It clones those repos for you, and we have tools that will let you sign your app, and the automation testing, Android testing, deploy it to different places like App Center and then App Store and stuff like that, and being able to test it out with the artifact that we host within the Bitrise, be able to send the messages in Slack directly to people or a certain channel. You might have release channels that you want to send the messages to. And the reason why this is so configurable for your mobile development is Bitrise is very focused on mobile development only. We don't really work with a lot of other kinds of software, and it is heavily focused on the processes surrounding Android and iOS development. It could be Flutter app, it could be React Native app, it could be Android native and iOS native app. That is why we have all these tools that is really needed for mobile development in general. I have talked a bunch about different steps, and I haven't really told you exactly what those are. And the Bitrise step is basically the heart of Bitrise. It's you could think of it as a certain automated task that it does for you. We have more than 300 steps in our step lib Bitrise GitHub repo, and there are a bunch of different kinds of steps. If it has a blue badge with a B, it is Bitrise official that we made, we support. And there could also be a community-based steps that can be verified by Bitrise. We'll try it out. We'll make sure that it works as expected. Once you verify this, it gets a blue check mark. And then you have other completely open source step that you can write once and then make it available for everybody. If you think it is useful for other people to use that kind of step as well, you can make that and just make it available for everybody to use. And all these steps are completely open source. So if you think there is something that you could improve on a particular step, you can go ahead and do that yourself. Now, without proper steps, what we have also seen people do is just create a bunch of scripts. So scripts are template. It's just you can write any script in there with a that is supported by a shell bash script. Most people write those, and just keep on writing commands in there. And people used to fill that out entirely, and that used to look monstrous and complicated. And so when you don't have those, that's one of the things that people do. And or you could write your own custom CLI to do a lot of these things in one single command from your own CI. And one of the problems that we also had when we were working on this is you have one guy who remembers all of this, goes on a vacation. Now you have a problem because you can't release the hotfix, which is due tomorrow. And those kind of problems is why, collecting all of those feedback and problems, we started to condense everything into these steps that you don't really have to worry about. Even if you leave that place, go somewhere else, you still have that step with you that you can utilize anywhere you go. And then when you combine all of these steps together, you can create workflows. Workflows could have branches in them. You could have a workflow that is depending on another workflow, and you can branch them any way you want to create your own ways of doing a lot of different automated tasks. For example, you might do build and run unit tests on every single build that exists. But when you need to create releases, you still need to build, run tests, and create RCs from there. So you can have workflow that just does the build, primary workflow maybe, and from there you can have another workflow, just add a certain task to be able to create RC from the things that you have already built. And now going to the steps that is written in Kotlin. One thing that you have to do right now for these steps, you have to write these steps, and if you need to go and check out the open source, you have to either look at the code in Go and you start writing Go code, or we have a bash script kind of steps that you could also write. Writing bash script code is same as the script that you're building. That is, but at the same time, it is available for the community once you write it. But Go is a language different. Let's just say that. And I personally prefer Kotlin as a language to be able to write all of this. So one of the things that I try to do after coming to Bitrise is like, let's support Kotlin so that I can write steps in Kotlin itself. And so that's the route that we went. Now, the way that we can possibly do this was, of course, using Kotlin multi-platform. A lot of the features are still experimental for that. So we have two different ways to write a step. A step is basically a script that you can compile into a binary that runs on any host machine that you are trying to run your stack on. Either I could go Kotlin native, or I could do a JVM console application. Started with Kotlin native first. The problem with Kotlin native, a lot of features are still alpha, and a lot of features are still beta. And doing a lot of things would require you to come up with your own libraries and a lot of tools that does not yet exist for Kotlin native. So instead of that, I thought, okay, let's go to JVM, because you could use any library that is made for Java, and you could use any library that is basically made for Android to be able to do the same thing. It is a little bit of work to get it to a stage where it works just as efficiently as a native application, but it's a trade-off for now that we are taking. But it runs just as fast once you actually compile it to the project that you want to compile it to. And you can just basically compile and run it with a Gradle wrapper as well. So, which means the library and the step that you write is going to be just like writing any Java or Kotlin-based library. You could use Android Studio, you could use any other IntelliJ that supports Kotlin multi-platform project to be able to do this. And just to get started on writing your own step for this, it's fairly simple. I have a URL in here, but the TLDR is you install Bitrise CLI. And once you have the CLI, you write your own step.yml file. You can copy it from another step that already exists. It demands certain parameters that you need to type it in, things like title and description and stuff like that. You don't have to mention that it is a Java-based or anything like that. But once you give, there is one parameter that it says Kotlin. Once you give that, it understands it needs to compile a Kotlin project, use a Gradle wrapper and everything, which is all done through the CLI. And to actually be able to build, this step, I am using IntelliJ. You could use Android Studio, anything that supports Kotlin multi-platform, like I said earlier. And for me personally, the first step that I do is probably the most important, which is to use a dark theme. And once you have that, it's much more easier on your eyes, and then you can probably code a lot better. And then once you have that, create a new Kotlin multi-platform project as a console application. And then once you have that project set up, just create your configuration for all the different libraries that you need to import in Gradle file, and then write your own code. This is a simple example of a clone step from GitHub that I have. I created a different utilities to handle your command line arguments and things like that, and then create a clone step that's in the configuration like URL, clone def, and other parameters that it needs, run it, and it does cloning for you. Just as simple as that. And then that completes your step. It is ready to actually be used on any project at that point. You can push it up to public repository, or you can also publish it for the community. It's basically 4 different steps using Bitrise CLI. You can run 4 different, again, it is documented very well in the Bitrise Dev Center documentation. And once it is available for the community, anybody can use it. You can go anywhere else and be able to use the same step. So full picture, you kick off the release, you use all these steps that you might build yourself, or the steps that is already available in the community. It could be written in Swift, Kotlin, Go, and Bash. And once you can use all of that, basically your rocket ship that you're trying to fire off just kicks off the way that you want. Final words, yeah, Bitrise pretty much empowers you to create your own tools that you can take anywhere that you want to go, and you can build them on the languages you love. So pretty much that is it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer you, but that's all about Bitrise. Yes?
Couple questions. So in the custom step you are building there, you got a couple of things like clone step, step handler.
Right.
Are those all things that you built, or is there like an SDK or something to just help like sort of bootstrap your custom step, like with interfacing from the infrastructure that's going to actually like run it and it just like giving you that information?
Yes, so all of these, the arg handler and things like that are the library that you can import within your project. It is not available yet, but it is in process of development. But once it is there, you could just bring that in as a dependency for your project, and it handles everything for you at that point.
Follow-up question then.
Yes.
So let's say we built our new step here in Kotlin.
Yeah.
I assume then that the underlying like VM that it's running in, like the JVM.
Yeah.
So is that something that like we have to make sure that like when we configure that VM that it has it, or is like just the JVM just like table stakes, like all the runners have it installed and just like for it?
Yeah, so wherever these steps are run in the Bitrise stack, it's all pre-installed for you. Okay. So you don't have to worry about any of the development aspect of things. And including the Android SDK and all the libraries are pre-installed on every VM that boots up for us that we try to compile for Android. Yeah. Yes.
This might sound like a premature optimization, but is there a performance cost providing the steps in Kotlin as opposed to Go or Bash?
Yes. So the idea is once it is compiled, once we create the binary, the amount of time that it runs in our system is almost identical. There is not much of a difference. But right now what it does is that it pulls your library, and there is no pre-compiled binary. So it builds it and then runs it, which means it's going to take a little bit of overhead to be able to do that right now. But yes, that is an optimization we'll have to do. And I think Kotlin native, that is why I brought up Kotlin native, is if we can compile it to Kotlin native, it's probably much more faster. It's like writing any Go binary or C++ binary. It performs on the same level, but JVM might be a little bit slower than that because it needs to boot up JVM, like you mentioned, and be able to run it there. But yes, once Kotlin native is there, that we can implement all of this, we'll probably move to Kotlin native so that we don't get that kind of degradation.
Does that overhead then show up as part of the setup time, like the runner?
Yes, it will show up as overhead, but a lot of the steps that we have available, generally to get them loaded, it takes about a second or less. So, minuscule.
Probably not going to be the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Android, though.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. Yes.
I was just going to say, I thought it was really cool that you had steps for doing things like deploy to the Play Store, and I was wondering how like sophisticated your like interaction with like your Play like listing can be. Like, can you like upload your like symbol files, your debug files? Can you like proceed through the different like test tracks and like do a stage rollout? Do you do all of that from these same steps, or do you have to get into like writing?
So yes, custom thing, the reason why we are trying to build all of these things custom, especially for Android side of things, is at Bitrise we had a lack of mobile experts that know about all of these really, details about the deployment process. And so we don't really know exactly what is needed all the time. So they started to hire people like me who have worked on Android and stuff like that. So a lot of this step do not have all the customization that already exists. That is why we empower people to be able to put up a pull request. If it already does not support it, put up a pull request if you think that would help make this better. But I would assume like it does not support all the features that would support on a Play Store as you are trying to use it as it is.
But if you have like open source for like your developed like, steps, and if you want to
Yes.
like, fork that and like put some extra stuff
Yep.
in that's going to work for you, you can do that. And it can
Yes.
be a step that's run by someone who's not a developer.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm gonna just keep asking questions. until someone goes off. So we talked about like writing the custom steps and sort of publishing and sort of making public. Can you have like an org level like step? So like I can publish something that's just available to like anyone like on our account or in our organization, but not necessarily the general public.
So it is a work in progress, I would say. We don't have what we call private step yet, but it is something that we have had discussions about. And as long as you can supply your own SSH key to be able to access the repo, you should be able to configure it in the future. But it's just, I don't think it is deployed yet. We work some on it, but it's probably not an option at this point. Yeah, but you don't really have to publish it anywhere because you can use any step that is in GitHub directly. So it does not have to be in the place that people can find easily. Something like unlisted kind of stuff. You could use that kind of step, but not entirely public ones.
So we can have one that, let's say, is like private within our GitHub organization,
Yeah.
but still point. So like in theory, if anyone knew where to look, they could maybe access it.
Yeah.
But like they still have to know.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yes.
I just follow on from that question. So
Sure.
that's kind of interesting how you're talking about like private steps, and it's kind of on the roadmap. Is there anything else out the roadmap that you can share, or is it something that we might get excited about?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we're working on is improving a lot of build time surrounding a lot of things that we do. Like creating RC for a lot of different companies takes hour and a half, 90 minutes, which is insane when you think about it. And so we are trying to think of a way, like multiple ways to build our step where we can empower your build step to run within 15 to 20 minutes down from 1 hour, 90 minutes or so. So that is something that we are currently working on actively with a bunch of mobile engineers. That is in near future roadmap, I would say.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
save the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because we focus heavily on mobile development process only. Like, okay, we work directly with Gradle, we work directly with iOS build system, Xcode build, and all the optimization that could possibly happen. We'll explore all of that avenues to be able to make it as fast as possible.
Are we done?
We started late, so you could wait. No, we still have time.
Yeah.
Next one doesn't start.
Okay.
Keep going.
So again, to continue on this thread here.
Yeah.
We have M1 runners.
Yes.
That'll go a long ways right there. Towards
Yeah. Right. We are now exploring M2 and M2 Max kind of processors as well, and M1 is something that we started to explore as soon as it was announced, because at that time I was working at Compass, and we were trying to see if we could support M1 within the same build system that we were working on. And one of the biggest problems is that our CI actually does not support it, and so how are we going to test if we can actually? And we had a lot of Google dependent libraries like Google Maps and other libraries that barely gets updated, especially when new stack from Apple comes out. And we talked to Bitrise. They're like, okay, can we talk about supporting M1 anytime soon, because we need to test out a few things. And Bitrise is like, all right, yeah, we'll start exploring this, and we'll start supporting all of these different kind of hardware that is upcoming. And they work with all the vendors directly. And if you need other kind of hardware that you need to support to be able to build your app, you can talk to them and they'll make it available for you. Yeah.
One more question.
Yes.
Can you schedule workflows to be run into the future? And if so, can you schedule them to happen once every 2 weeks? That turned out to be really hard to do with a cron job logic. And is a
Yes.
big frustration with power.
100%, and that is both of those things are entirely supported. The apps that we used to release in many different places, they have weekly cadence. Like, we need to code freeze at 3 p.m. on Thursday, and so you set up a job on CI so that people cannot tell somebody to my PR is not merged. Doesn't matter. We have a job schedule, and it cuts on 3 p.m. on Friday, and we used to schedule weekly releases that way.
That's what we want, but we've had issues of getting a cron schedule specifically for every other week. Weekly,
I see.
fine, monthly, I think also fine, but
Yeah.
every other week has been challenging to the point
Right.
where we still manually click the button to then go kick off the workflow that runs the rest of the automation.
I see.
But yeah, if you have, if we could schedule something for every other week, that would
Okay.
actually be a compelling thing for us.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll try to see, if that is something that we could do. But the worst case scenario in that particular case is to use probably Bitrise CLI to be able to schedule. Once the release is cut, you Bitrise CLI to schedule another one for 2 weeks later, at the same time. But, all right.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.